Māori housing providers are worried isolated Māori communities are being under-resourced and forgotten about in the Cyclone Gabrielle response. Te Matapihi, the National Māori Housing Advocate Organisation, is calling on the government to lend Māori providers high trust funding similar to the processes used during the COVID-19 crisis. Tammy Deha, the CEO of Te Korowai Hauora o Hauraki, joins me now. Tēnā koe e te tuahine. Tell me, what are some of the stories that you are hearing from Māori communities in rural areas severely affected by the cyclone?
Tēnā koe. I think it's safe to say, and this is without speaking out of turn, for te rōpū manaaki ki kainga o Taramai Nuku, is that our Māori communities are saying that it's time to, attend to the recovery, that we're needing the roads to be, repaired properly in terms of the safety for our whānau to return back. We're hearing that preparation is required because these events are not, a one-off. We've been experiencing similar, severe weather events since January. We've had 4 to date. Huripari Gabrielle is just being more severe because we had one prior to that. So I guess in terms of supporting those of our whānau, those of our rōpū that are actually in many of these isolated communities is what Te Korowai Hauora o Hauraki is pushing in terms of ensuring that there is funding available to support them as being the first responders in the emergency times. We have a number of isolated pockets within the Coromandel, the peninsula of Parehauraki Rohe, and, have the commonality of slips, the commonality of roads that are pakaru is quite the normal, but we need to respect the fact that these are our communities with our highest Māori populations for here on the Coromandel Peninsula, and that we have an expectation of our iwi, of our marae, of our hapu, of these rōpū and their whānau to actually be the arms and legs and the first responders on our behalf. So, having that recognition without so much of the bureaucracy around, some of the funding requirements is what we're advocating on behalf of these rōpū.
And how are whānau in these rural communities looking after themselves?
Look, it's easy enough for me to try and summarise as to how our whānau are looking after ourselves, but just as a bit of an example, the rōpū are very thankful to our iwi, to our Hauraki Māori Trust Board for getting the kai packages into these kainga Māori. But the problem was, the effects of power cuts that last over several days and longer for some of our kainga, the fact that there is no access to the petrol stations and, to get gas or petrol was some of the issues that we had, because we had marae and whānui actually doing the cooking because there was limited access to generators. There was limited access to, to the gas burners, because there was a huge reliance previously on marae having access to power. That's no good when the power goes down, and the kaipaks, when they're not cooked, are no good for our whānau too. These are our communities where our kuia, our karawa, are living with their mokopuna, and there's just this reliance that our marae will be part of the response, but it's unfair and unjust when they're not funded to support their response, right? And the reliance is on the fact of their manaakitanga for their people, for their whānau, for their hapuri whānui. So, I do agree in terms of supporting our rōpū here and various rōpū across the motu.
So speaking of this support, what action is needed right now to assist these whānau in their recovery?
I think the action, which is pretty obvious, is that there does need to be some pūtea in there to prepare these communities. This is not going to be a one-off thing, realistically, right? This is not going to be a one-off thing. We've seen it happen over many occasions since January, so it is very likely that we will see it again. But they need to be prepared. You know, there's things in terms of we rely and hope that they've got generators ready for the next time the power's going to go out. We hope and rely that they're going to have, you know, the big tanks of petrol. So, you know, it's these things where how do we actually turn a kaipak into kai? Hey.
Tēnā koe, Temi Ziha from Te Korowai Hauora o Hauraki. Tēnā koe, thank you so much for your time today.
Tēnā koe.